We have a bunch of really interesting questions, some general, some specific for each of you. So I'm going to start with some general ones first. And this is actually the question that 3D Repo have asked themselves, but I feel duty bound to ask, which is, what is the number one concern in the AEC industry today? Just one.
Safety.
Any advance on safety?
I suppose in the context of some of the stuff here, it's a sort of capacity to change, I think. I think that's one of the sort of things that there's a lot of, I mean, we're sort of preaching to the converted here, really. Sorry, getting back feedback again. But I think in terms of a lot of the, alternative ways of working, how quickly that can sort of be adopted and realised. I think there's a human component to that. It's not just about technology, which I think is the biggest challenge, I think.
And you're optimistic about that behavioural change happening? Anybody optimistic about it? Show of
I
hands.
am optimistic.
Oh,
After what we achieved.
We are. Bride and Wood are optimistic. That's good. Good to hear.
After what we managed to achieve on this collaboration with Highways England, considering the fact that we don't have this background, that was a really great collaboration that made us make this project real and made them use it in their process. So I think that was a great achievement.
Anyone else like to?
I suppose from a client side perspective, it's about confidence in your program and the design program. We get to the 11th hour and everything's fine, it's all fine, it's all fine. And then we're actually going to be 6 months late. So they're having the visibility and the communication coming up, it's certainly really frustrating from the client side.
Are you suggesting honesty is not a great characteristic in our industry?
Well, it's not just honesty, is it? People sometimes don't even know how bad it's going to be. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. Oh, it's not all right. So yeah, that's a big challenge because that pushes everything back and puts the pressure on the construction program, puts pressure on the financial institutions. It affects your reputation. It's pretty challenging.
And similarly wide-ranging, but what do you all feel is the most exciting technology that's going to drive the industry forward over the next year and a half?
3D Repo.
Did you get that on tape?
I think a year and a half is a very short amount of time, isn't it? People say that people always underestimate what will happen in the next, or overestimate what will happen in the next 2 years, but underestimate what will happen in the next 10 years. And 2 years, 2 years you could see some changes, but a year and a half is very slow. I think we'll just see a bit more of what we're seeing already.
But do you not feel though that in other sectors, I'm thinking, software and technology, digital sectors more specifically, that 18 months is a hugely achievable deadline to manifest change or disruption? I always feel that we're not ambitious enough in any way. I think that we easily create these kind of long timelines of change and justify, it's going to be really difficult, but actually it is only behavioural, right?
And I think, behavioural in the sense that actually we need to get better at sort of saying, hey, okay, the project's taking this duration, but we can, adapt and be more agile during the course of that project to say we don't necessarily have to stick with the technology or the workflows or the approaches that we sort of set in stone on day one. So I think that's almost some of the challenge that we would do face is, the longevity of the project means that actually you can almost think, it's too late to change. On the next project, we'll do that on the next project. And there's never a next project, basically, that you apply these techniques to. So, so I think that's something that can be, speed up the adoption of some of these technologies, I think. We should do it today rather than wait for tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely behaviours. Definitely.
Yeah.
Technology is past us now. Before we used to use technology, it's not capable, it's not available. It is. It's way more advanced than what we're using it for. Now we need the behaviours and the culture to catch up.
So it's integration of kind of legacy knowledge as well, and making sure that carries forward, like you were saying about Bob the Bobcat driver, being able to Mike, being able to take his knowledge and combine it with the technology platforms. I think that's it's that piece.
Yeah, there's a lot of expertise.
Yes.
Spread, not just in small rooms that we all go into. So yeah.
So the most exciting technology is people.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good answer.
Okay,
Human brains.
That's enough of the general questions. Now I've got some rather pointed, specific ones for each of you. So who should we start with? Okay, let's start with Maria. We have a good question here. So doesn't the rapid engineering model make designers obsolete?
Obsolete.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Not really.
You can say yes. Controversial and appropriate.
It might be in parts of it, but what we want to achieve with rapid engineering model is achieve better control of the design. There are so many parameters that affect the design that we can never have one single option of a design. With this process, it means that you can focus on adjusting those different parameters and work with different iterations quickly. And then still a designer, or whoever is involved in the design process, should define what is the best output on its case. So there is a big combination of information that we take into consideration and the human,
Judgment.
Judgment on this. Thank you, Phil. Teamwork.
I mean, from my side as well, I would sort of say that lots of what you guys have all shown tonight, in a way, describes different kinds of behaviours within the industry. So I would say that it's not about none of these things are about making designers obsolete. I think they're all about changing what historic or traditional idea of what design activity might really be. I mean, Maria and I are both designers. Many of us work in design, and many of you guys as well work in design or engineering places, or collaborate with them at least. I think those roles will change a lot rather than becoming obsolete. And there's still a ton of work for us all to do out there. So nobody panic. Okay, a question now for Al. Have you thought about creating a reference cloud-based object library that can be referenced to make the file sizes of Exchange even smaller?
Well, I think that is quite interesting because I think there's two parts of the problem. There's the, I suppose, connecting the individuals together in terms of sharing that piece of information, the changes that they wanted to make, sharing that actual design workflow. But then there's actually this sort of common objects, the actual objects themselves. Actually, a lot of the work that we've been sort of pushing and celebrating is that actually you need to allow that flexibility to kind of say, my definition of this object is different from your definition of this object. But equally, you want to have some sort of some level of, at the start of the project, that sort of have this sort of common language that we're not sort of completely freeform and just sharing ones and zeros. So I do think, something that we're interested in and be interested in others' thoughts on is that as we start to connect these models together more freely, as we allow appropriate sharing of data and mobilize more data to sort of move between different platforms, actually what is that standard representation might actually be, emerge naturally out of that process. So actually, we at the start of the project, we collaborate quite closely. We always start with, defining our objects in this way. Halfway through the project, they might emerge and change because, change happens. So I do think that by having, sharing more access to, our own information, we can, as a industry, as a community, start to sort of have the question was, a sort of a cloud-based sort of repository, which we can say, well, let's not start from scratch every time. Let's actually start from this new foundation, so we can incrementally add more detail into that the next time, more detail into the next time. So I think I would hope we do end up being able to make incremental development easier by sort of sharing more information, I suppose. Don't know if that answered the question.
Let's say yes. Okay, next question. This is for Simon. What features are you using on 3D Repo? What do you see as the biggest advantage?
Well, actually, I was just talking to the guys. For us, and technology in general, we go to a lot of events and you hear about things and you see them stretching this and pushing it to the max, and we forget that the vast majority of people just want a tool that works. And we're using the basic features. We're democratizing the model. That's what we're doing, is putting it in the hands of people who are normally freaked out by CAD. So what features are we using? The basic features. Views, issues, measure. Pretty much that's about it. So we're not sweating it, we're not pushing it, but we've got to take everybody with us. And until everybody comes along, we're not really going to... There'll be a couple of people and we're pushing it on the other end and we're looking at APIs and connecting and automation. But to be honest, it's a really good platform that replaces the need for us to install paid software on multiple laptops and pieces of hardware. So
Okay.
not a stitch-up.
That's a good question. Good answer. So this one's for you, James. The reality of site can often be different, even with meticulous planning, due to events outside of the main contractor's control. So how do you deal with and resolve those kinds of day-to-day issues?
Outside of the main contractor's control.
Yeah.
So detailed deliveries and design changes and everything else. Is that
And the weather, I guess, as
the
well.
weather and climate change and how do you deal with it? I guess we hope in the future to see better sensing and better delivery at gates and better management of what's actually happening compared to the plan of work. So if there is the ideal plan of work is fixed, I guess, at a certain point. There is a fixed way of working, a Gantt chart that has thousands of activities, 100-year-old technology, but then having better sense on projects. So that steel member comes in with an RFID that logs into something that controls deliveries, or at least very quickly shows the impact of that change, possibly, which we don't really do on projects. We don't have good construction level sensory feedback. So we're not feeling the buildings as the infrastructure as it's being delivered. We're just kind of going back down to spreadsheets and ticking things off and saying, yeah, that's in place now. It's not dynamic. It's not dynamic. No, it's not linked to anything. So, yeah, better sensory feedback.
I mean, might expand that a little bit. There's a couple of questions that come up about cost. And one of the things that strikes me about the thread for many of the presentations is about sharing information in a easy way, in a smart way, in a light way, in order to assist design coordination, collaboration, and ultimately decision making. But obviously, cost is a huge part of that. And the question really is for all of you: who's had experience of integrating any cost considerations into some of these things, into anything that you've been working on? So that's a kind of open question.
A little bit, but so geometry loaded cost or task loaded cost and resourcing spreadsheets and things. But it's basic hack. There's nothing super smart. I don't know, Simon, if you
I agree. I think we haven't really got the QSs on board to go digital at the moment. They still feel somewhat threatened.
Controversial.
Who disagrees with that statement? Nobody. You know what? I've got QSs that are really willing to get on board, but their bosses aren't that keen. But from a cost point, 4D is really where we've only looked at cost loading. When we've got some tools in the rail sector that are really interesting about loading that up, and it does provide a basic indication of what things are going to cost, and especially in a repetitive space where we're doing a lot of production line type stuff like plain line track renewals, and it's starting to go that way, but there's a long way to go. I think we need to do a lot of you do need a room full of QSs, and we do need to educate them. I just did a
Guest list for the next British Information Modelling event is set.
There you go. I just presented to 60 planners just recently, and QS is next.
Okay, Tom, there's a couple of questions for you here around. So, did you create your own viewer, or did 3D Repo supply the viewer part of that? And how are you integrating with the 3D Repo API? And is it open? And how might others use that?
Sure. Yeah. No, the viewer's 100% 3D Repo. So there's a whole series of JavaScript libraries that come with that allow us to just kind of specify where we want it on the page, load it in. Like I said, hide and show the controls that we want. And then that comes with its own set of APIs where you can enable and toggle all of the things that you can already do through the UI, you can do via JavaScript calls. So in fact, if we wanted to integrate into that kind of left panel that you saw, additional functionality that triggered, we can do that. So it's all there's a back-end API which gives us the data, and there's also the front-end JavaScript API that allows us to control exactly what's happening with that viewer, and that's all from 3D Repo. Yeah, it was only the outside and the kind of skinning that was our application.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay, I'm conscious of time and temperature in this room, and the fact that everyone probably wants a drink and maybe some food. So I'm going to wrap up maybe with a final question. Well, maybe comment actually. The last question I was going to use was something about what remains our biggest challenge in BIM or digitization, and I think you've all kind of commented on that already. There's a kind of cultural thing to this, there's a behavioural part of it. I mean, from my point of view, it's really exciting to see six presenters sharing real, tangible digital projects that are actually being used in some pretty large-scale and impactful environments. And this is not just fantasy stuff. This is out there. So it's not the technology, the barriers. For us, clearly, the technology has just been shown to us. So for me at least, we have to get over the kind of the dream of some sort of easy silver bullet of technology. It's going to be the hard yards of actually getting onto your laptop, getting onto the computer, and getting your hands dirty with this, and trying it, and not waiting for the Earth to spin 10 more times until we decide to kind of fix construction. I think we have to start doing it right now. And I think these were 6 great panelists, 6 great presentations that really kind of showed the art of the possible and also what's actually happening currently. So I invite you all to give them a final round of applause before we get some refreshments.